exciting parts about being able to do this presentation is we're usually presenting on a bit of a time limit, like we have 15-20 minutes with the board or 15-20 minutes with a parent group, and tonight we've got a good chunk of time, so we can spend some time talking about some of the neat things that we've done and to give a little bit of insight into how it all came together and what we hope to accomplish with it. So going to go ahead and share my screen here because we do have a slide deck for you. So I want to make sure this all goes the way it's supposed to. Okay, everybody see a screen in front of them? Excellent. So Aimee and I are going to be presenting on what we've come to refer to as our whole child framework. And you're seeing a portion of this framework that especially pertains to youth mental health. This framework has actually been kind of under construction for about the last 10 years under the leadership of Regina Siegel. She had done really some groundbreaking work in terms of community partnerships. We'll be able to highlight some of the places where we first started. But we've been at this for a while. And over the last 10 years, we've really come to appreciate and understand and prioritize youth mental wellness, as well as staff mental wellness and family mental wellness, and really do see it as, the school's part of the school's responsibility to be responsive to the needs of our community. And we know that this is a need that is out there. Want to start with a graphic here, and this is a framework that our Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction had developed several years ago, referred to as their Wisconsin's mental health framework. And I share this with you because this is actually one of the, I'm not even sure if Wisconsin uses this anymore. I mean, I kind of looked for it today, and like any good state agency, they have new graphics and things like that up. But we've been using this framework really as a basis for how we think about our whole child framework, the foundations that we felt like we needed to have in place and that we worked on, and the development of some of the systems that you'll see tonight. And the idea behind this is that mental wellness and mental health is something that we need to think about for all of our kids. And just like Helen had shared, a lot of times, when we talk about mental health, it ends up coming from like a disease model, and sometimes solely a disease model. And what we know is that there are things that we can do within schools that can promote positive behavior, mental wellness, skills that we can work with children on to help protect them from adversity. That question about would you want to go back and be a teenager? I talk with a lot of young people because I do a lot of work with school discipline, and growing up is a hard deal, and adversity is part of the human experience, and part of our responsibility is helping prepare young people to face that. And it can be personal challenges, it can be social challenges, it can be all sorts of challenges that they might face. But what we've come to understand is that there's a lot of things that we can do to help support and prepare youth for life. So while I've said that we've been working on this framework for 10 years, we've really, I think, accelerated some of the work around our whole child framework in the last few years, largely in part due to a large grant that we received from SAMHSA called Project Aware. We're just finalizing our third year of a 5-year, $2.5 million grant that was aimed at 4 strategic goals that you can see there. Increasing the capacity for schools to respond to on-site mental health crises, increase youth and family voice and authentic engagement, improve cross-system collaboration to improve mental health supports, and increase access to and engagement of mental health wellness treatment resources for children and youth. Little did we know 3 years ago that we would be facing a pandemic. And we know that the impact of the pandemic and the ongoing impact of the pandemic has been profound on youth, especially marginalized youth and families who are disproportionately impacted by all the challenges related to it. So we consider ourselves honestly just fortunate, lucky. I'm not sure what the word is, but we really had a bit of a head start in developing this framework, and it really provided us an opportunity here locally to be more responsive, to have resources to mobilize supports and services, and many of those you'll be able to learn more about tonight. I want to start with just a chart here. This isn't something that we've historically shared in these presentations, but I think it's appropriate for the group that we're visiting with tonight. This was out of some research 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, that looked at cumulative lifetime prevalence of major classes of DSM-4 diagnoses. And the research ended up looking at a lot of different cuts of data, but this was one of the cuts of data to really look at, when we think about school age youth, what can we anticipate in terms of needs that might arise related to children's mental health. Knowing that, across the lifespan, kids experience things at different times. And of course, for a lot of adults who are working toward recovery and treatment, some of those challenges came as they were school age. We share this because this was, like I said, 12 years ago, and early in the pandemic, we were on some webinars with like UW-Madison and some other educational institutions. And one of the things that they shared is, within the first couple months of the pandemic, they were seeing upwards or reported upwards of like 20% increases in anxiety and depression in school age youth because of school closures and social isolation, and the challenge of shifting from face-to-face learning to, virtual learning, where, we're giving them one-to-one devices and hotspots and trying to sort out schedules at home and the like. And so, this really speaks to us because it really, I think, highlights the need for a framework like we've been working on within schools, knowing that a lot of these challenges start early on. And so one of the conclusions of this particular paper that was released is that it is critically important that we develop systems of support that target prevention and earliest intervention to support youth in order to make an impact, especially for adults. So we're keenly aware of this. We've been kind of reflecting on this with some of our supports, looking at, we're asking questions like, what is happening, or how do we need to be prepared differently for our 4K learners or our 5K learners, seeing that there's just this significant jump in anxiety related needs at that age. Of course, as we look later into school age, it's the impact of substance use and abuse, and how do we align systems and strategies that again provide for a strategy around prevention as well as early intervention.
Curt, I'll add. Can you hear me? I'm okay. I'll add too. I mean, I think looking at this graphic, it really highlights the importance when we talk about prevention, and you'll see in our presentation how we kind of structure things starting with prevention. It really is about what are those things that we're doing with all kids to support them, because if we're seeing that upwards of 20% of students of children are having some level of significant anxiety before they leave elementary school, there are things we can do in our classrooms that will support all kids and support those kids that are experiencing those higher level of anxiety too. So really stresses the importance of universal practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one caveat with this graph is this is cumulative lifetime prevalence. So this graph does not take into account recovery or treatment or those sorts of things. So this is, the cumulative, lifetime report. So. The study, just another caveat or how it came to be. This was a national study, and the researchers ended up interviewing a little over 10,000 adolescents to look at their mental health history and measures of well-being. So this is like one of the first of these types of studies that were completed. So, like Aimee had shared, we've been working on a strategy that includes essentially prevention supports, our school-based infrastructure, things that we offer within school, school student services, and then our community-based supports. And we really think this three-legged approach is a strategy that really makes sure that we support students early on, that we're responsive to needs as they come up within school, and that we really connect youth and families to services in the community when that's needed. So we'll start with some of our prevention supports, and the first one we want to highlight is something we call our PBIS framework. PBIS stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. The framework in kind of a simple version, it's designed to make sure that students understand and have a chance to learn and a chance to practice the expectations, rituals, and routines within the school. I think a little bit to that graph that we had just shared and some of that anxiety, those bigger increases in anxiety from age 3, 4, 5. Schools are a pretty unfamiliar place for kids. They're leaving oftentimes the safety of their home. These parents, these caregivers who've taken care of them for all of their life, and it's an unfamiliar place. And one of the things that we know is if we can create structured environments where expectations are clear, where we have adults who are caring and supportive, who are positively interacting with students, and are using effective methods to help shape and model behavior, that we can reduce some of that anxiety, and that we can see some better outcomes for students. So part of our PBIS framework is a universal strategy. So all of our schools implement these 5 parts of the framework. First one is establishing clear expectations and rules for the school. So if you've ever been into one of our schools and you see posters on the wall that say, be safe, be respectful, be responsible, or some version of that, those are the school-wide expectations. Those expectations get better defined by space. So we spend time with kids to talk about, well, what do those things actually mean in a classroom? Or what do those mean in the hallway? Or what does that mean in the lunchroom? Really to make sure as kids leave their home and come to a school where they're sharing time, space, and resources with other students, that they know what to expect and that they've had an opportunity to learn those. Part of PBIS is making sure that we teach students these expectations and routines to fluency. One of the things that we share with our schools, different from when I grew up, is that telling isn't teaching. And my school experience was probably a lot of telling and repeating and things like that. Maybe a little bit less teaching, and we think that these are skills that students can learn when they're provided the right opportunity and the right context. Part of PBIS is making sure that we maintain positive school environments. There's a whole lot of research around, really everything: schools, marriages, business teams, that there's a kind of a magic ratio we talk about, 4 positives to every corrective, that has a tendency to influence positive behavior, helps shape trust, helps influence expected behaviors. And so that's one of the things that we expect within our schools, is that teachers are mindful of that. Teachers are naturally looking for excellence in education. So there can be a tendency where we do look for kind of correcting and adjusting behaviors, or whether that's academic or social behaviors. So this is something that we really work with our schools on. Final 2 is really to make sure that we're effective in how we're correcting unexpected behaviors. making sure that adults are regulated, that we're responsive, that we're, having proportional responses to incidents, keeping little things, and using data to inform decision-making. So we collect quite a bit of data around school discipline that helps us understand, are there procedures that are leading to some of the challenges within schools, or are there certain skills that we want to reteach? We have that data available to us. For students who need extra support, off to the right, we have a range of interventions that we work with students on. And they include, contacts with supportive adults to get feedback on behavior, additional instruction in groups, mentoring you can see within that, functional behavior assessment, wraparound supports with the county. So we believe that this PBIS framework is a big part of what helps kids really understand what to expect and how to perform within schools. Our next prevention framework is our social emotional learning framework, and this is not totally new, but we are now implementing social emotional learning district-wide. And I've got a couple of the resources that we use for that down below. If PBIS is about making sure kids understand the rituals, routines, and expectations of school, social emotional learning, or SEL, is designed to make sure kids have the skills for life. So you can see over on the right-hand side a wheel of that framework. Those competencies, which include self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, social awareness, and relationship skills. We have been evaluating over over a little over a year ago, we were evaluating different evidence-based curriculum to be able to deliver this instruction. And so what we've settled on is for our early learners, so our pre-K through 8th grade are working on a curriculum called Second Step. And our high schools are starting to pilot and will be implementing next fall a product called School Connect. But those are all explicit SEL skill development lessons that help students really develop those skills for life. We wanted to share just an example of what that looks like when you hear SEL and what that actually means. Part of the reason that we needed a pre-K 12 strategy around social emotional learning development is that those skills become more sophisticated as kids get older. So this is an example of Wisconsin DPI social emotional learning competencies, and this is around self-awareness, which is one of the domains. But you can read for yourself just how this particular skill, this ability to understand and manage one's emotions, really develops over time. That really young students really sometimes don't have a whole lot of emotions other than mad or sad or glad, I suppose, would be the three big ones. But of course, as adults, we understand, gosh, there's a range of emotions that we need to learn about. And that we need to be able to recognize first in ourselves, and then be able to recognize in others, and understand that these emotions, now that we can name them, they have different grades. Being frustrated can be from just a little bothered to really frustrated. And kind of finalizing with adult SEL, really being reflective in how understanding our emotions, recognizing the emotions of others, helps us to think better about relationships and influences, how we approach those relationships. So it's just an example of what, in one area for one skill, what SEL provides.
One of our approaches around our SEL implementation is really about having all teachers being the ones implementing this curriculum. So a lot of times SEL lived in the counselor world, which is great. Our counselors are really proficient in these social emotional skills. However, we want to make sure that all adults in our system are proficient in what SEL competencies look like and how they evolve over time, particularly because sometimes as we get into the older grade levels, we see adults have expectations on children that maybe are misaligned with where they are in their development around social emotional learning. Or if we aren't taking into account, if a child hasn't learned how to identify a range of emotions in themselves, we can't expect them to be able to navigate through the complex emotions that others have, and that can lead to conflict. And so making sure that we are teaching the whole progression and that all adults in our system know how to do that. And beyond that too, the whole concept of adult SEL is something we talk about too, that we as adults also have to have awareness of our how we operate in a social emotional landscape, and that our healthy SEL development in ourselves leads to better outcomes for kids and better healthier relationships and environments. So it really is an all-encompassing approach that we're taking to how this is implemented.
So strong SEL skills within kids really comes down to opportunities to learn, practice, model, see. And so while we're using an evidence-based curriculum now, one of the most exciting parts about our implementation plan is we're working toward integrating SEL within instructional plans, mainly because there's really so many opportunities within literature as you're studying characters or as you're studying historical events, to really talk about self-awareness and self-management, how people resolve conflict, and what a character might be thinking. And we really believe like all those opportunities to be able to see SEL in natural environments and natural discussion will really increase just what we call the dosage of SEL exposure, and help solidify those skills for our students. So. Another prevention strategy that came out of our Project Aware efforts, and Aimee will talk more about our plans for this in the future. But this past year, we piloted a mental health screening at Longfellow Middle School. This is our only school where we've administered anything like this. We worked with Dr. Rob Dixon from UWL, and he provided just tremendous insight and support as we kind of thought through all the components and implications of administering a screener. We used something called the Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire, which was a self-report tool that students completed at the beginning of the year. Aimee and I had a letter available for parents of Longfellow explaining what we were trying to do with the mental health screening. Parents gave consent, so the only students who participated were students who had permission to. But it really gave us some tremendous insight into some of the needs at Longfellow and I think generally in our community. Sharing just built a dashboard that really helps us analyze the data related to the screening. And so one of the two big pieces that we looked at was internalizing barriers and externalizing barriers. So internalizing is really looking at a combination of emotional and peer issues. And externalizing is really looking at like conduct, sorts of behaviors, hyperactivity with students. And it has been an unusual year related to discipline because it's felt like we've seen more conduct, we've seen increases in discipline behavior. But one of the things that is noted in here is really in surveying our students at Longfellow, one of the trends that really emerged that we spent a lot of time talking about was an increase in these internalizing needs. Students who are struggling with peer issues, social conflict, social media. And as we really looked at and kind of dove into some of the discipline issues that we were seeing, it was largely rooted in emotional and peer problems. You know, that sometimes the symptom of what's happening with a student might look behavioral at the end of it, but when you really look at root cause, There's ties back to, kids trying to cope with social pain, kids trying to cope with issues that are, happening on social media, students who are struggling with social isolation and connection and those sorts of things. So obviously we got a lot more information than just these two graphs, but it's an example of how we're really starting to think through how do we really find out about the needs of our kids. Prior to the mental health screening, we were really good at identifying student need, largely based on if a student was showing up to the office for discipline issues, if a student quit coming to school, and if a student's grades started to slip or that they were struggling. But one of the things that we recognize is there are some students who show up to school, they're not getting in trouble, their grades are okay, but they're still struggling and need help and support. And so this screener really helps us make sure that we're checking those things out. The response within the pilot, as far as the outcomes, ranged from a universal response, being able to offer more targeted SEL lessons, all the way to identifying who these students who got flagged at risk. And we had student services personnel and other folks reach out to families and to really make sure that those students were connected to a care team of some sort. And what we found was many of them were already connected with a care team and some community providers, but some weren't. And this really helped uncover that. So I'm going to turn it over to Aimee, and she's going to talk a little bit about our school supports.
Yeah, so after we think about what are we doing kind of across the board for all students, we naturally will talk about kind of what services and supports do we have in place within our schools to support students that may have additional needs. And a lot of our supports, and the ones that most people are commonly aware of in school related to mental health, is the services that our student services support staff provide. And so student services encompasses kind of four big professional areas. Our school counselors, our school social workers, our school psychologists, and our school nurses. And obviously they all have unique roles within the schools and offer different varieties of services, but they all intersect too and weave together to provide a comprehensive level of support for kids and families that may be struggling. So with our school counselors, we have school counselors across all our buildings, and they are the ones that I kind of like to think of our school counselors. They start their supports at that universal level where they do serve all students, and they have a role in supporting all students through classroom guidance, through relationship building out in the schools. But they also intersect and work with kids that maybe are having more struggles through small groups, through individual counseling. As I spoke to earlier, they are kind of our experts in SEL. So now that we have kind of all of our teaching staff implementing SEL instruction, they are supporting that and are great resources for our teachers and are collaborating with our classroom teachers in that instruction. Our school
Did Aimee drop for other folks? Oh, here she comes.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. My Zoom just died. It said your 40 minutes are up. I'm not sure why, but I'm glad I was able to get back in quickly. Yeah, so our school service, our school counselors, they provide those direct supports. They also play really important roles in that academic career planning piece, which although it doesn't seem directly tied to mental health, having Goals and being future focused and having hopes for and dreams for your future is directly tied to positive mental health outcomes. So the work they do in that academic and career planning side of things is critical as well. And then they consult with community school districts, collaborate with parents, co-workers, and work with community agencies as well. Some of our school counselors right now, we're working right now to enhance their skills around that direct support for students that may be having mental health challenges or issues. We're working on learning skills around CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy strategies that they can implement when working with students. We have some counselors that are getting trained in dialectical behavior therapy strategies and how they can be applied in schools. So while they work at the universal level, we're also enhancing our skills within our counseling groups so that they can provide more direct mental health supports in our schools as well. So if our counselors kind of start at the universal level and work their way up, I really look at our school social workers as ones that kind of start with those students at the top of the triangle where they're working. Their primary work is focused around kids and families that are experiencing challenges, and sometimes they touch into that universal level. Our social workers really are about removing barriers to learning that may exist for students, but also for families and the environments that students live in. They're working to understand the systems that families are engaging with and where the struggles are, and are really a bridge between home and school and then community resources. They're the ones that are helping families get connected to food, to housing, to outside mental health supports. They're collaborating with the county and county level services in that way. They're communicating with mental health providers in the community to make sure that we have continuity of supports. They do home visits. They do a lot of focus around attendance and truancy because we know that attendance issues is a sign and symptom of something else going on with students and families, and we want to make sure that we can address those needs. And then they also do individual and group supports for students as well. You can go to the next one, Curt. Our school psychologists have a wide range of training that also includes that direct support for students. In our district, they work significantly within our special education population. So they're working with students and families that have disabilities, including behavioral and emotional disabilities. And they are also working with the teams that support them to make sure that the services we provide through special education are impacting students in a positive way and helping them reach their goals. They are very systems level thinkers, are very into data and making sure that we have systems that our data supports are providing good outcomes for kids. And then our school nurses, we think of our school nurses as often being the ones that are dealing with the bumps and bruises and the stomach aches and the illness in our school. But often our school health rooms are the first place that kids show up when they are having emotional or mental health concerns. A lot of the anxiety that we talk about, that first shows up in the school health office, and our nurses are sometimes the first line of defense in assessing and making sure that we are responding to anxiety and other mental health issues that are at school. New this year, we have embarked on a new partnership with La Crosse County Human Services for around this concept of a community social worker or a school/community social worker. So we identified we really partner a lot with the county and county services and county teams and social workers that are working with our families. We are often on wraparound teams as school providers working alongside county supports. And through collaboration with the county, we identified that sometimes navigating through systems can be really complicated for families. And so we were looking for ways to remove barriers and make navigation through those systems a little easier for families. And so through that, we came up with this concept of this community social worker. So these are school social work licensed individuals. We have 2 of them that are employed by the school district. However, they are duly trained through the county as CCS service facilitators. So they are able to be the social work lead on CCS cases. So CCS being that coordinated comprehensive services model through the county for students that are having mental health issues. And so they provide that service to the county reimburses us for any time that is spent engaged in that work. Where we see that as being beneficial is really rather than having multiple layers of people that families need to work through, we have social workers in the schools that see the kids every day and are close to working with those kids and families that then have direct access to the resources and frankly the funds to get services for that family in the community, whether that be working with mentors out in the community, whether it be engaging in therapeutic supports out in the community. They're able to navigate and help facilitate those services getting to the family as one less layer. It also has been really beneficial because we are seeing we're able to identify kids that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been identified for the CCS program and get those referrals and those families through the referral system and into the program to receive supports in a more timely fashion. We are seeing stronger partnership and a better understanding across systems of how the school works and how the county works and how we can work more efficiently with our services as well. So this is a new program. We just started at our middle school and high school level this school year, and but it's been growing and it's been a real benefit to be able to partner in that regard. And finally, at the school level, we have this year an individual named Stephanie Harr, who is a certified parent peer support specialist. And in that role, so the concept of this is it is a parent that has gone through the experience of raising a child who either has substance or emotional or behavioral challenges. So she went through a series of training so that she can be a support to other parents going through similar circumstances. She is an employee of the school district. She has another role too. She's our parent engagement coordinator for Project Aware, but in her parent peer support specialist role, she's really there to connect with families and to help just navigate through the challenges, to be a social emotional support for families, help families navigate through different systems, to talk about her own lived experience and give strategies for parents of how to cope with the challenges that come with working with a child that may have mental health or substance use challenges. And it's a free program for families, and it's just getting off the ground now, but it's been of value to just give parents that additional resource and additional support at a peer level rather than at we're all the helpers that come around, but this is somebody that actually has lived the same experience that a parent might be living. That I'm going to turn it back over to Curt to talk about some of our community sports and wonderful partnerships we have to support students. Curt, you're muted.
And I said something profound. Now I lost it. No, I was sharing. We've been just incredibly fortunate to have the partnerships that we have within the community, and we really believe from the school district, as we think about our prevention supports and our school supports, we can't do it alone. We need partners to really be able to wrap around students and provide supports, and we rely on each other. And part of that EPI mental health framework from the state is really an integrated care model that families and students really aren't going to benefit from silos of service where the school's doing their own thing and the community organizations are doing their own thing. And so a lot of the work that we've done is tried to integrate some of these supports, so it's easier for students and families to access, and quite honestly, the care is better. So start with one of our earlier partnerships, a program that we call Handle with Care. And this started with discussions with our La Crosse Police Department and then expanded to other area police departments and other area school districts and eventually health systems. But Handle with Care is a program that we developed that allows for one-way communication to school districts when there's a call for service that involves school-age youth, and where an officer feels like the nature of the call warrants a heads up to the school. All of the area school districts have set up our own email addresses to be able to take on Handle with Care. And it allows us to receive this notification, and we're able to provide some support to the teacher, some information to the school on how to support that student. And we've had students who've, middle of the night been witness to some pretty violent things in the community, or have had emergencies that happened at their residence, or for our healthcare partnerships. Parents can elect, if a student comes in for a mental health emergency through ER, we can receive a Handle with Care through that system to really, again, help prepare our folks to be able to support students properly. The way that the partnership works is, for instance, if we have a family from La Crosse who might be involved in an incident out in West Salem or out in Pullman, all of those departments have all the communication set up, so we can get notified if it happens really anywhere in the region. We also work with area school districts. So for some reason, we get a Handle with Care referral on a student who's not one of our students, we can help get that referral to where it needs to go. We really feel like it's a trauma-informed approach, not because we need to know what happened, but it has been helpful to know that something happened, and it helps prepare staff to be a little bit more flexible, to check in with the student, to be more responsive to needs within the classroom. So that is our Handle with Care program. Program that has been longstanding in some of the work of Regina Siegel is our mental health liaison program. For a long time, we have worked to recruit and have mental health providers stay connected to schools, really to provide a number of services, to be able to be kind of a consultant around maybe school mental health issues, to work on staff development, to support conference night, parent consultations. And so our mental health liaisons are at this time volunteer positions, and they volunteer about an hour a month to really work with schools and be available based on their needs. You can see on the right, we do have some openings. We've had some folks retire, we've had some folks leave the area or change positions. So those are things that we're always actively recruiting. But these folks have been a tremendous asset for teams to be able to connect with and get advice on. All of these individuals also serve on our district mental health advisory committee, which is a committee that meets quarterly that actually helps build a lot of what you see here today. They're providing guidance as we're thinking through, what would mental health screening look like within the school district, and advising on some of those strategies. So tremendous program, and we appreciate the folks who've been able to volunteer their time to support our schools. Community mental health providers. So this has been a program that's been around for a long time, and it's grown. We have about 55 approved community mental health providers who can meet with students in our schools and provide treatment right on site. The arrangement is the district agrees to provide the space, and they work with the parent on arranging the care. And so a lot of it has to do with just coordination, making sure that there are private therapeutic spaces for providers and students to use. Pre-COVID, we served somewhere almost 100 students a year this way. During COVID, a number of the services ended up moving toward telehealth. And as it worked out, we had a tremendous one-to-one program with a big investment into hotspots. So many students were able to access their mental health services using district devices and either their home internet or our hotspot internet. And we're beginning to see kind of a recovery back into school-based services, but this is something that has been available to students in our district for quite some time. We also manage a couple of different funds to be able to help out with mental health services. So if, for instance, there's a gap in care or a family's changing insurances, or the family doesn't have insurance, we do have some funds, one through our La Crosse Public Education Foundation, and one more recently through Mayo Health System, through their Gratitude of Giving program, where we can work directly with providers and help pay for direct service for students.
Curt, I think you skipped.
Oh, skipped one. We're going back one. Must have double clicked it. Our student family assistance program, this is new with our Project Aware grant, and the partnership in the short version is we were able to contract with Gunderson for 2 full-time mental health therapists to work right within our schools. One dedicated to our elementary level and one dedicated to our secondary level. And we've got 3 components of that program, and I'm going to let Aimee kind of talk about that first component around school-based support.
Yeah, so the first component of the program is really around developing the skills and knowledge and practice of our school-based providers through professional development, consultation, collaboration, coaching. So really our SFAP providers, they work in close collaboration with our school-based student services folks, our counselors, our social workers, our school psychologists, and they are influencing them in a variety of ways. One is through, and Curt will talk a little bit about the direct services they provide, but whenever an SFAP provider is working with a student, they are doing that alongside our school-based folks. And so that there is continuity of care, that there's transfer of skills into all settings, and in a way that is bringing some of the advantages of some of the clinical skills that these providers bring to our school-based practitioners. And we've seen some great collaboration and great just partnership in that regard. We also are using and working with our SFAP providers to identify professional development needs within our student services staff, and then develop and in the future implement professional development that will support as well. And then they really just work in partnership on teams, talking with them around cases that they're jointly working on, or consulting just on specific skills or issues that may be faced throughout the school day. So that's the first strand of support that they're doing. Do you want me to talk about the second one too, Curt, or I forgot what? Yeah. The second strand of their work is really around parent education, outreach, and consultation. So part of that is putting together newsletters and informational materials that are shared out with families. We also will talk about in a second our website that we just launched, but we hope to be able to curate videos and whatnot that these folks will be able to put together around strategies that families can use around specific issues as a way to do parent outreach. And then being available through our typical ways that we work with parents through parent-teacher conferences or other events that are happening in our schools as a resource that parents can can talk to about concerns or ask questions or just discuss anything that they may have on their mind.
And the last component of our SFAP is short-term early intervention services for students. And you can kind of think about this as like an employee assistance program. The way that it's designed is that students can access up to 5 free sessions with one of these providers. And we designed that without much for restrictions, mainly because we really believe in early intervention. You know, as we talked with Gunderson, one of the things that they shared is, you know, for a number of issues or a number of concerns that might come up with youth, sometimes 4 to 5 sessions is really what's needed to get a plan to get back on track. And one of the things that we were, you know, were and continue to be concerned about is, you know, for families who might have insurance where, gosh, those first 4 appointments might be $300 each or $400 each, you know, and they're trying to figure out, you know, do we pay that? Do we just see if it gets better? Is what I'm seeing normal? You know, is this normally what fourth grader does, or is this what teenage years are all about? As they're kind of questioning that and putting off that care, we know that this is how some of these issues can fester and become bigger and a bit more unmanageable. And so this component of the program really allows families to connect with a provider early on at no cost. So they can ask those questions, and students can, you know, visit with a licensed provider to receive that early intervention support. Right now, this component of our Project Aware grant is funded for the next couple of years, but we will be entering into some discussions like in the long term. We've really felt like this has been an effective approach. We've seen, I think, upwards of 50 students, even after implementing it just for part of this year. But we will be looking for ways to sustain this because we believe it has been such a need. One of the trends that we're seeing in this component of the program is, you know, our hope was the vast majority of folks who might access this might just need that turnaround care, 4 to 5 sessions. What we are finding is about half the students that are referred are kind of completing care within 4 to 5 sessions. The remainder are, you know, kids who are needing more intensive care. And so we're going to think about that. And how to support that differently. And I think that somewhat speaks to, you know, a little bit of the pandemic in that, you know, for some of these students who spent, you know, time at home, time away from friends, the anxieties of you know, life in a pandemic, this might just be some of the impacts of that we've got other students out there, many students out there who maybe delayed care or didn't have access to care. Or we just didn't talk about care and that we need to be able to support differently. But very excited about that program. Super promising, and the 2 folks that we have from Gunderson are outstanding providers, and we feel very fortunate to have them. Okay, I will pass it along to Aimee.
So we're also really excited to another component of Project Aware. We've been working on a district mental health resource website. And we are excited that we just recently kind of soft launched the website out there. So it's kind of ready to go. We based this off of a website that was created by another Project Aware site in the state through a previous cycle of the grant, but have kind of made it into our own, really with the intent of having it as a resource guide, having it a place where parents and students can go to make referrals for themselves or others, and then also to be able to navigate through our community mental health providers. And Curt, I think I might just take over the screen, possibly. Oh, except I'm guessing when I got kicked out, Helen, I lost co-host ability. So are you able to, or maybe Curt, it just would be easier.
I can
give it back to me.
Yeah, give it back.
Sorry about that.
Hold on a minute.
So as Helen's doing that, I'll just speak to, we really see this site right now. It's kind of the base level of information out there, but we see it as a place where we can curate all sorts of resources for families. So as I spoke to earlier, we hope to use this website as a place where our SFAP providers can do a 3-minute video on strategies to use if your student is experiencing school-related anxiety, or if your student is engaging in self-harm. Here are some things that you should do, so that it's accessible in multiple formats for families. So I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough of the website just to show you what it looks like. This is the landing page for it. Of course, the number one thing is that this is not an emergent, like intended for emergencies and to call 911 if somebody's experiencing an emergency. If you scroll down, we highlight Great Rivers 211 as a resource that we hope people access as well, beyond just this. And then it gets into the resource guide, the different types of concerns that we have information and strategies and resources for. And then our provider guide. And you can also see all of this navigated up on the top navigation bar here too. So within our resource guide, just to pick one of these, if you look at concerns about suicidal thoughts or behaviors, it really gets into just some considerations for how to support youth that may be having suicidal thoughts. Some action steps if the youth indicates that they have a plan to kill themselves. And this is intended for caregivers, not, for a youth themselves, but for like a caregiver, a parent that's working with a child. Obviously, highlighting that we call 911 if there's an imminent risk, and to make sure we take this seriously. Using emergency services in these situations, connecting with supports for aftercare after a situation, when to call 911, and then what else can be done, and some resources. Again, this is base level. We hope to link in area resources that are available for families. And this is just one example of many of the different issues or concerns that a family or a student might have that they might be looking for information on. There's also a referral guide here, and this is intended to be referral to our school-based providers. So it lists all the providers within each school. It gives contact information for all of them. And then at some point too, we are going to add just a generic referral pathway, that just a button if you want to, if you have a concern that you want to reach out, that would go to kind of a central place that can then get to the right person to respond. So that's something coming in the future. Our provider guide highlights all of our approved providers that Curt talked about previously, that are able to come into our schools to provide services, and the agencies that they work with. In the future, we have some ideas of how we'd like to develop this, that we really would like to see our providers having access so that they can update, have links to their programs, and talk and be able to highlight like specialty areas of providers, what type of payment and insurance models they have available, whether they're accepting new clients or not, so that when families are looking for supports, they have a way to, start that search process. Right now we have a list of 55 people and a bunch of phone numbers, and it's great to have all those resources, but like, how do I know who is the right fit for my child and the concerns that they're having? And then we also have a link to our anonymous reporting system, which is called P3. So that is a place that anybody can go and make a report of any concern that goes both to police department and to school administration and student services staff for response. So that is our website. And then going back to our slide deck, and I'm going to have to get on the right. right page here. So then thinking about future work and where we're going with all this, we're really fortunate. We do believe we have a really strong continuum of supports and services for students and families. However, we're also very aware that there's always room to grow, and we need to make sure that the supports we have out there are accessible and are the right fit and matching the need of our students, who are the ones that we ultimately serve. So we are doing continuous alignment work of supports with needs, and gathering information from stakeholders, including our students. So talking to our students, we're going to be doing a survey of our students around mental health supports in the next week here, to get information about what's working for you, what are you aware of, what are you not aware of, how can we make sure that you that your needs are being met with the supports that we have available. We're looking at refining our referral pathways. We have lots of different supports, obviously, but like, how do we make sure that we have efficient and timely referral pathways that are easy to navigate for everybody that uses them. We are looking to expand our mental health screening, so that mental health screening that we did at Longfellow, we've gathered, it's been really a successful pilot, and we're looking to expand that into more buildings next school year. It probably won't be district wide, but buildings that are ready and have infrastructure in place to be responsive to the data that we gather through a mental health screening, to be able to analyze that and to put into place responses both at the universal and the targeted level. We'll be expanding that mental health screening process. Like I said, expanding our Cooley Bridges site and making sure that we are curating that with content that's relevant and timely for families and accessible in different means. You would have seen, obviously there's lots of things to work through in terms of like language accessibility, and making sure that it's accessible to all of our families. So knowing that reading a bunch of text on a screen isn't always the best way to get information. We're looking at creating videos in different languages to be accessible by our different populations that we serve in the future. We want to make sure that we right size our community mental health supports, and that we're not just adding to add, but that we have the right supports available for students in the right way. And then ultimately sustainability. We have a lot of great programs. A lot of it is thanks to Project Aware and the work we've been able to do with this grant and the funds available through the grant. But we've found success in a lot of those programs. And so how do we sustain them into the future and make sure that we are able to continue to provide these supports after this grant has expired as well. So lots of work in the future, and we really just work to be reflective on our system so that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of our kids and not just designing systems that are out there to look good, but really that are out there to provide positive outcomes for kids. So with that, I got to get to the right screen. That, I think we can go to questions and discussions. So does anybody have any questions or comments or feedback? And I'm going to actually stop sharing so we can see faces.
All right, Alice, you have to unmute. There you go.
Yeah, this is a really encouraging situation that you've painted. I had no idea that there was this extensive a look and resources available. So first of all, congratulations, a lot of hard work here. I'm interested in a couple things. One is, what are the key indicators of when kids are in trouble? And do a lot of them self-present with these kind of resources available to them? And then another one is, what's the deal with social media?
We'll take the social media question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think our kids present in a lot of different ways. But as Curt said, and one interesting piece that we found through that mental health screening at Longfellow is although we make the assumption that, we respond often to the externalizing behaviors and the things that show up in the classroom that are disruptive or potentially dangerous in the classroom. We actually have a lot of kids that are experiencing internalizing issues. And so that anxiety, that feeling of hopelessness, that depression, that are less obvious. And so being attuned to students that are withdrawing from interaction in their settings, being attuned to how anxiety presents itself sometimes in those externalizing behaviors is a lot of the work that we are doing with teachers to make sure that they can tune into that. And that's all based on that relationship building. Like, our teachers need to know their kids so that they can see changes in behavior. So that's what I would say the big presenting behaviors that alert us to concern. I think one thing and feedback we've gotten from some of our students, if you've been following some of the communication our students have been doing to our school board, is that a feeling of not necessarily feeling that there's access to supports in the school. And I think where we're trying to navigate through is, obviously we have lots of different programs and resources. So how do we make sure that it's aligned with what students need, and how do we make sure that students are aware of it and able to access it in ways that are meaningful to them? So just because right now, for us, it's, well, yeah, go talk to your counselor and they'll hook you up with any of these services that we have available. Maybe that's not the way that students reach out. Maybe students are more likely to talk to a friend about how they're feeling, and we need to work with our students to be able to identify needs in their friends and help them get to the right pathway for supports. Or maybe they're talking to their parents more, and we need to do more outreach to parents. So those are the things that we're trying to get a better understanding of, so that we can make sure that all of these great supports are known by our students and families and accessible by them. And then social media, I'll turn it over to Curt because I know he does have insight into this, but I will say that we are seeing social media greatly impact the behaviors and the challenges that we're seeing in our schools. And I think Curt can speak to, in his discipline role, kind of the impact that social media is having with students.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge, we've had those discussions come up recently in some other conversations. I think the challenge with social media, and we're trying to think about like what is a healthy dosage of social media. The challenge with social media is that it's really was never designed to be healthy. It was designed to make money. And the companies that created a lot of those apps and programs hired behavioral scientists to make sure that people got on and they stayed on, and that they clicked and they followed links and became preoccupied with it. And so I think to a large degree they were pretty successful. The challenge with social media in young people is they often see it as a connection, some type of a connection with friends, and become reliant on that. But themes around, especially around, products where you can send messages and they disappear and there's no accountability. We've seen a lot around social pain, bullying, harassment. We've seen, fake accounts and folks sending things randomly to other students. And I think one of the challenges is that, not only do the students don't necessarily see social media for what it is, parents don't either. Like, the realities that folks create in that environment are just not accurate. They're a version of maybe an ideal truth, but they're not exactly the whole truth. So I think on that component, on current students, that's a concern. On some of the other concerns that we have is just around parenting and the availability for parenting. We know how important early life connections are to attachment and mental well-being and those sorts of things. And so one of the other concerns that we have is, we've now have a generation of folks who've had phones in their hands as they have kids. If their parenting strategy ends up being disrupted because they are also dialed into their own screen, we miss opportunities for, gaze with kids and play and reciprocal interactions and the like. So I think on that front, unfortunately, I think society will learn some of the consequences down the road of what technology and social media has impacted. Not saying it's all bad. But a lot of it wasn't necessarily designed to be just good. So,
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions?
I think this is Diana Diaz-Granados with Better Together. What a wonderful presentation. There's so many things that stuck out, that really stuck with me, and particularly starting, with what you said, that this has been in the works for 10 years. And so it's, congratulations really for all of this, and to have seen it growing over the past 10 years it has been amazing. My question is, you mentioned that a basis of your mental health work it starts with your PBIS and then the SEL, social emotional learning framework, and the role that adults play in that. That adults, you said, need to be regulated to be able to do that positive correcting, to be able to identify behaviors, and to be able to teach SEL. Can you talk a little bit about how you are teaching the adults within your schools to be more proficient in SEL lessons or skills and skill development?
yes, and I'm sure Aimee has thoughts on this too. So part of SEL implementation is adult SEL, and so in part of our readiness efforts to begin teaching students SEL, we provided training to school staff, which included like self-assessment on your own SEL development, where you see kind of your skills at, and it's such a it is literally probably one of the most critical components. I almost think like the curriculum comes second. What's most important is that you have healthy adults who are regulated, who are prepared to model these practices and point out these practices. In fact, we've been looking at some of the resources that Bruce Perry has put together for around trauma and his neurosequential model for education. And he highlights that kids weren't the only ones affected during the pandemic, that these stresses were felt by adults as well. And the basis of his work is really the only folks who can regulate dysregulated people are regulated people. And so actually today in one of our leadership meetings with all of our principals, we talked about organizational care and efforts around social emotional learning and supporting social emotional learning of our adults, so they are ready for that. Aimee, I don't know if you've got additions.
No, I think you covered it. I would echo that it is, I agree that really critical, and we are having a lot of conversations recognizing that a lot of our staff are doing well, but several of our staff have struggled over the last couple of years, and they're working with kids and families that are, if they were struggling before the pandemic, are definitely struggling, at this point. And so it adds a lot of stress. So just helping staff be aware, building healthy systems that allow adults to self-reflect and find opportunities to regulate themselves during the day is important as well. So yeah, it's multifaceted. I mean, from the teaching them about like the implementation of the SEL with our curriculums. Like, we're intentional that we want all teachers doing this, not just our counselors. Like, that's intentional, but also a part of the implementation of SEL is adult SEL. And so, and that's kind of one of the big components. And if you don't have that, you're not going to have a strong system for your kids. So I think that's spot on, Diana.
Yeah. One of the examples that was shared was that we had a school go through the self-assessment. One of the themes that they identified is, staff really reported some skill gap, I guess, in terms of how to manage conflict appropriately. And so one of the connections that was made was the mental health liaison for that building came out to do some professional development this past week on that topic, on how to approach conflict and manage it successfully. So, similar to kids, adults, those skills aren't always like innate. We learn them by seeing them modeled. We learn them by being taught them, and we see that as part of our SEL strategy. So,
thanks. Lynn, you have a question?
Yeah. What if you run into a parent that is not supportive of their child getting help with their mental health? And how do you help that child if the parent is resistant to it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's not uncommon to face that. I mean, unfortunately, mental health does have a stigma, and it's hard as parents to see when your child is struggling. So I think that's a really important point. We work with families and with kids with where they're at. Obviously, formal mental health supports require parent permission and parent consent. And so we're not going to push anything on a child without that partnership and that agreement of the parent. But we do see that working alongside parents is critical. And so we work real hard to establish good relationships with our families beyond the student, to work with parents with where they're at, to implement supports that a parent is comfortable with in an effort to maybe build to the point where they can access more formal supports. And that's the beauty of the model that we have, is that because we start with that strong foundation for all kids, that has positive impact, even if a kid can't get to more formal supports later on because the parent's not ready. And we will work with families until they are, and until, and do that in a caring and compassionate way.
Helen, you have a question?
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to thank both of you for giving up so much of your time tonight to come and speak to us. I'm fascinated by this topic, and I'm fascinated that our school district is so progressive and really has this kind of programming for the community. My question is, I was looking at the graph that you presented early on about, the anxiety and the other different levels. And I was blown away by the fact of the high anxiety level at 4-year-olds. So my question is, I can understand 4-year-olds coming into the school, pre-K, and being in a new routine, and how separation anxiety and all that may play a factor. And when you were looking at that, can you differentiate between children who are in daycare as opposed to kids who did not go to daycare and came strictly out of the home? And secondly, are you collaborating with daycare providers to provide, a smooth, seamless transition for kids? I know, I don't know if that helps or not, but obviously it seems to me that if we want to try to reduce some of that anxiety for 4-year-olds coming into pre-K, that we need to start before they even come to the school system. And I don't know if you've thought about that or if you have any ideas. I'm just kind of interested in that age level.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. I'm sure Aimee has some thoughts too on this one. I think that anxiety coming in really does speak to some of the variability of early life experience for kids. We'll have students who come into school who are early readers, that walk in next to a student who's maybe touching a book for the first time, orienting it, not sure front to back, holding it upside down. And I do imagine, some of the challenge, of course, is the transition out of the family into a big new space where, they're sharing time, attention, and resources with other students. Part of that anxiety could be, the huge culture shift in terms of academic demands and familiarity with what school is. And we do think that early life experiences play a big part in terms of school readiness and confidence coming into the classroom. We have students who attend 4K, come in for either a partial day or in some of our sites all day 4K. Those students do go through that same process of coming out of the family, but they do enter kindergarten with some of those routines, expectations, early literacy skills and the like. So we have been talking. One of the areas that I oversee is our community school initiative in Hamilton and in Northside Elementary, and we're doing some community impact work too. But we have been talking about, geez, if we for mental health and a whole lot of other reasons, if we really want to change trajectories, how do we help support families way early on? As those students are young and having experiences and having daycare, not having daycare, are there things that we can do as a community to make sure that every child in our community gets the best start in life and has the best opportunity and is resourced to be successful? So.
Yeah, I'll add, you touched a soft spot for me, Helen, because like this early childhood piece is near and dear to me, partially because I have a 2- and 5-year-old, but also because I just believe in the critical importance of that early childhood experience. And some of my thoughts are that I wonder about the impact of some of the early life experiences our children are having, whether it be at home, where, as we talked about the social media impact, where adults maybe are a little more disconnected because we are tuned in more to devices and less into that play and natural interaction that happens. And kids that maybe don't have rich early childhood experiences that are play-based, because play is that place where young children learn to experiment, they learn to make mistakes, they learn to those social interactions and the give and take there, that is critical for that transition into school and being successful within the academic realm of what school is when you kind of enter kindergarten into first grade. So I wonder a lot, especially coming out of the pandemic where we had a lot of kids at home, not in early childhood learning settings, with parents that were stressed by either juggling work and childcare or loss of income and the stress that comes with that, the impact of that on those anxiety levels as kids transition. But we are fortunate. We have partnership with a lot of our daycares because we have 4K sites that are housed in a lot of our daycares. And we've been doing pyramid model training, which is basically the early childhood version of PBIS with our 4K sites. And we've also are implementing a new framework for curriculum. And I use curriculum lightly, but framework for how we do that play-based learning in our preschool settings that is steeped in social emotional learning as well. And so I know that we partner, especially within those daycare settings that are more, that we have our 4K sites, we have good partnership there, so.
Thank you.
Great question though.
Thank you. I see from your presentation just how complicated it is to try to address mental health issues. I mean, it's been like that ever since people found out there's mental health problems. The stigma's still there, and you're really doing a nice impact on changing the climate, looking at ways to deal with all these things. I was really happy to see how enmeshed you are into trying to address these things, and it's this completely complicated structure you're working through. And I can see why it took 10 years. It probably take another 10 years to get to where you really want to be. A lot of groups, have trying to address mental health stigma, are going toward focusing on mental well-being, which is a little more softer and, everybody feels good there, and then addressing it. But you're talking about the prevention and trying to, get all these different groups together. And there's a lot of groups in La Crosse County that are working on this. And, I'm glad to see them come together. And I'm also glad to be in a community that has a school like this, a school district that is doing this to address this. As a judge, I see all the mental health problems coming into my courtroom. I don't know if I had both of you recently in my court, but at least Ms. Zabrowski was on a young man. And, it's a shame when we get to those levels, but you're doing so much to try to prevent that and deal with the issues as early on as possible. So I really appreciate that. Any last questions?
No, I was trying to clap my hands for excellent presentation, and I've got to learn more about Zoom, but I'm so happy you were here, and I hope that we can have you come back again sometime, because I think there's so much more that we can learn.
Yep. Diana has a question. Or are you clapping?
Yeah, she's clapping. I couldn't get the
All
clap to go
right.
up.
She's still muted, so we can't hear her.
I'll do the real thing.
All right. Well, thank you both again very much. Your boss is not here anymore to hear the good comments, but he's the one that brought you. I think he knows and appreciates you very well, and is glad to have come into a school district like this where they put all this upfront work. And I suppose it makes it a little easier for him to accomplish some things given all the ground that's been broken. So again, thank you both for coming. And
What you guys are doing is awesome. I wish they had it when I was in school.
Back in the dark ages when it was truly a stigma and nobody would come out.
Right. And thanks for calling me old, Dad.
No, I'm talking about all of us that didn't have that opportunity. It was truly a dark ages,
Yes.
So, all right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you all.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.
Stay safe.